You may have heard about CityWorks Expo. For years now, we've been bringing people together to share big ideas for better places. Expo connects innovators across the community and around the globe through an ongoing series of events, conferences, and social media. And our goal is to inspire and support people like you, the ones who have a passion for making their neighborhoods, communities, and cities better places to live, work, and play. Check us out at cityworksxpo.com to learn more. Become a part of the Expo community and share your story. You never know who you will inspire with your big ideas.
Good afternoon. I know it's 4 o'clock and it's going towards the end of the day, but it is truly indeed an honor and a pleasure to be with you. As Ariel mentioned, I'm Charles Thomas. I'm the executive director of a nonprofit in Charlotte, North Carolina called Queen City Forward. We are an incubator for social entrepreneurs and a catalyst for social innovation in our city and our region. And I come to you today very blessed. So earlier this year in January, have you ever heard the phrase, be careful what you wish for? So in January, a funder called me into the room and said, all those years you've been talking about doing community development work, I would like you to move forward with that. I'm going to actually give you the funding to pilot that program. And I went into the meeting thinking that I was going to have to do a hard sell, talk about all this, kind of sell them on this idea, and they said yes. And it was so exciting for me that I left that room on a high, but I also thought about how are we going to shift our whole plan and our whole process over the next few months to do community development. For up until this point, the work that we've done has been in the center of Charlotte, in uptown Charlotte, around entrepreneurship. So I left the conversation struck with all kinds of questions about, do I really know what it means to go into a neighborhood and be of assistance? Do I know how to be and foster co-creation so that we're creating change not from a top-down approach that I know better than you, but from an approach that welcomes everyone? And this is interesting for me because personally, I grew up in an underserved neighborhood. And so it seemed like I would have all the answers because of my experience, but since then, I've gone through a lot of different changes. And I'd like to share with you a little bit of my story and my journey to discovering myself as a social entrepreneur, and more recently, discovering myself as a sacred activist. So it all starts with a fall from grace. And along the way, I've had to lose my religion and lose money to get to where I'm at. And so when I was 15 years old, I don't know if you guys remember Jim and Tammy Faye Baker. Do you guys remember those two? So my grandfather is a minister, Methodist Episcopal. And when I was 15, the whole experience around Jim and Tammy Faye just rocked my world because I had such a strong belief and strong Christian faith. And it left me lost for a few years until I went off to school, went off to college. I had the fortune of attending Duke University. And while at Duke, while I was there, I took a class in Eastern religion. And I had lunch with a friend who was telling me actually about a trip that he had taken, not a driving trip, but one of those drug trips, and said how he had connected with God. And it totally reframed my perspective around religion and spirituality. But while I was also at Duke, I studied economics because, again, as I was growing up, single mom, dad not present, poor, my goal in going to school was to make lots of money. And so I majored in economics because I like money. And while there, I learned about how money works, how capitalism works to organize people and nations. And also, while I was there, I learned that having is a lot better than not having. So when I graduated college, I was determined to get a job with a large corporation so that I could move up and make lots of money in the world. And I succeeded in that. I had an opportunity to work for one of the largest consulting firms in the world at the time. And the interesting thing is that after 3 years, I realized that money was not as a part of what I really wanted to do, and that it didn't lead to fulfillment. So one day I told my partner that I quit. I had done a self-assessment that said, if I had 6 months to live, what would you do? And my first on the top of that was, quit your job. And I just quit. And he thought I was crazy, and he said, why do you want to do that? And I said, because I want to get up every morning and be happy about what I do. And he said to me, he said, Charles, that doesn't exist for very many people. And at some point, you're just going to have to just kind of suck it up. And so I didn't believe that. I couldn't do it. So I left without a plan. And from there, started a photography business and went on to teach kids about photography. And I ended up working for a museum called the Light Factory Museum. And along the way, I began to kind of rediscover this idea, or I discovered this idea of social entrepreneurship. Because I was really trying to put together, what is this capitalism thing that we have, and how does it work, and how do we do it in a way that is purpose-driven and purposeful? And so when I had the opportunity to lead Queen City Forward 4 years ago, I felt that I'd come across a wonderful coming together of capitalism and entrepreneurship into this idea of doing good and doing better, called social entrepreneurship. And that's what we do at my organization. We help to accelerate businesses that have a triple and double bottom line, and we help to work with them to be better change agents and change makers. And along the way, of course, I was fueled by wonderful social entrepreneurs like Muhammad Yunus. But as I was going through this process, I still felt that the tenets of capitalism as a norm, it's just not quite it. And so as I was preparing for this speech, I had it all laid out. I was going to talk about innovation from the grassroots up and da-da-da-da-da. And then I read this book on August 3rd, 2015. It's called Sacred Economics. Have you guys ever heard of this book, Sacred Economics? All right. Has anyone heard from Sacred Economics? Wow. All right. So it's a book called Sacred Economics, and then I read a sequel called A More Beautiful World Our Heart Knows Is Possible. This man, Charles Eisenstein, turned my economic world upside down. And so once again, my worldview was shattered, followed by a reawakening of my soul. And I was introduced to concepts and words that go beyond religion and money. And as I read about sacred economics and sacred activism, I began to see myself and the business model that I was working with reflected in every turn of the page. So sacred and economics, these are two words that don't really go together, right? We were talking about it over lunch, like love and power. It's like they're on the opposite ends of spectrums. So in his book, Eisenstein gives a history of how we got to the problems today. And in summary, our society has constructed a story that supports the belief that we are separate and disconnected, that we're separate and disconnected from nature, that we're separate and disconnected even from God. Think about the story of Adam and Eve. And as such, we live in a world of scarcity, a world of lack. And as I accepted this perspective of Eisenstein, I began to recognize that the world is truly abundant and that there is no lack and there is no scarcity, that this is an illusion, a story that steeps us in fear. And furthermore, if we are able to expand out of that and see the commonwealth, we'll be able to increase our chances of solving systemic problems that plague our society by tapping into the genius of our community that is usually overlooked. So Charles Eisenstein says now is the time that we reimagine our story, that we use our imagination, and that we shift our value system from short-term profits and the commoditization of resources to a system that values life as sacred, so that we have a potential for creating a thriving society in a more beautiful world. His arguments are so compelling that it shifted my worldview, but the cool thing in his second book, A More Beautiful World That Our Heart Knows Is Possible, helped to rebuild the foundation that was so turned around. And it began to challenge my previous notion of a social entrepreneur. Because when I'm a social entrepreneur, I kind of look like this, like I'm the savior of the world, like I'm Superman. And I go out every day and I go to tackle the world's problems as if I'm doing battle. And I only find myself exhausted and disheartened with the problems because they seem too big for little old me and too big to make a difference. And of course, probably like a lot of you, the funding. The funding and the economic incentives, they're like crumbs in the grand scheme of things. So when I'm in doubt about my next steps, I bring one sacred yet simple teaching to the moment. I breathe. I get present, I meditate, and I look at what I can change. And that changes me. It's what we've been talking about this weekend. And from me, at the core, I'm able to expand outward into family and into community and society at large. And so My family has been an incredible testing ground for this idea and these principles of sacred economics. So I have 3 beautiful boys and a beautiful wife, and I have to test these principles every single day, even today. I'll tell you a little bit about that. Because I have to get these 3 boys out of bed every morning to go to school, right? And I have to do it in such a way that honors them. And then I leave the house every day, and I have to sweet talk my wife into letting me go. So, more importantly, though, I have my oldest son, who's taught me so much about life and unconditional love. He's also one of the only people in the world that causes me to lose my temper. So for those of you who don't know, I'm a really cool, laid-back guy. But this young man is the guy that just causes me to lose it completely. And so, according to the old story, I'm his father, he's my son, and therefore I know more and he knows less. I'm right, he's incorrect, and he should follow my orders. That's the story that I had. And of course, that's the story of patriarchy and separation. But fortunately for me, my son, he hates authority. He hates being told what to do, and whether he loves me or not, he doesn't care, he's just not willing to do things blindly just because it's what I say. So I think in my mind that he's a born sacred activist. So how does a father facilitate the development of a child determined to be himself, even though he doesn't know everything, in a world with dangers lurking around every corner that may harm or debilitate him or his future? How do I raise a child that both honors his autonomy and allows him the freedom to explore the world while teaching him how to respect at the same time? Well, using principles of sacred activism have really helped. It actually helped just like an hour ago. I got a phone call from my son's math teacher, who's saying that he's being disruptive in class and that he is almost going to be sent to ISS. And I'm like, oh my God, this is the last thing I want to think about at this time. But I had to just breathe. And I talked to his teacher and I talked to him. And what I've learned over the past few years from this incredible young man is how to speak to the heart, to stop yelling, to notice how I feel, and to be empathetic to how he felt, to learn to really listen to his story on his time, not just my time. He always liked to talk at like 10 o'clock at night, and to start each conversation with love. And we laugh more at each other. I laugh at him, and he laughs at me, and create more playful opportunities. So why is this important to the work that we do and the work that I do? Because I feel that even those of us trying to do good without even realizing it can unconsciously find ourselves falling back into examples of the old story. So take my wife, who you all heard from a little earlier today. She's beautiful, compassionate, loving. She rescues stray animals and sometimes rescues humans as well. But if you are an insect that chooses to walk across her kitchen floor or come into her house, smack, you're dead. And so the interesting thing is I take an opposite approach. I try to catch every bug that comes in the house and put it in a jar to let it go, because all life is sacred. Or a friend of mine who's an architect. He's a fist-raising, Black Panther-supporting, down-for-the-cause kind of brother who recently purchased 90 parcels of land in a historic Black neighborhood in Charlotte. The goal was to create mixed-income housing and maintain the character of the community. Then the recession hit, and economics shifted, and promises were unfortunately broken. Now there's $600,000 homes being built next to $60,000 homes, and people who've lived there all their lives can no longer afford to stay. So in our old version of capitalism, they say that in development, all boats rise, which I know is true, but I also know that a lot of people are left out and can get crushed by the flood or by the rising tide. So even in his effort, my friend, to be conscious and thoughtful, he himself got caught up in the reinvention of an old story, gentrification, a story of neo-colonialism at the cost of community. And again, don't get me wrong, I do believe that development and growth is critical, but I believe there is a way that we can create incentives and rewards that align to our value of humanity, where everyone is a shareholder in the commonwealth of our community. And I'm not interested in creating a revolving door or a revolution of power shifts of haves and haves not. I think it takes a conscious evolution through constant noticing, an acceptance of self, and appreciating our other selves. I believe that we can have a more beautiful world founded on principles of love, sharing, community, and respect, all the things that we were taught as children in kindergarten. So as executive director of Queen City Forward as a nonprofit, I'm tasked with leading our organization in generating revenue and sponsorships and fundraising. And for the past 4 years, I've been concerned about the survival of our organization. And like maybe some of you, I hate to say it, that every once in a while I've gotten caught up chasing the money. And this kind of dawned on me when I was watching my 6 and 8-year-old play soccer. And I noticed how all the boys and girls chased after the ball. Wherever the ball went, they went without regard for energy, strategy, or technique. And I pulled my son aside and I said, Christopher, how do you feel? And he said, I'm tired. I asked if he wanted to score more goals, and he said yes. And I said, well, why not do what the coach says and stop chasing the ball and stay in your zone and wait for the opportunity to strike. Wait for it to come to you. And so as I began my talk today, I told you the opportunity came to me to do something even greater. I didn't have to chase the money. And so from that lesson, I'm becoming deeper into understanding not only how I can be myself, but how my organization can be more of itself. And then as my wife now says as I leave the house, she says, have more fun fundraising. Have fun fundraising. So all this has informed the work that we do at Queen City Forward. And it's helped me to look at how we do in a different way. And so as we embark on our community development efforts, we are embarking on a way to work with community that uses principles of human-centered design and principles of sacred activism, where we honor the community and honor where they are, so we don't come from a top-down approach. And so my team has developed a really cool process where we work with community leaders and residents for a short period of time, 6 weeks. And during the process, it's done in such a way that we allow residents to work on a challenge that they decided is important to their community, not something that we've decided. And when we work with them, we teach them the human-centered design principles over an orientation. And then for 6 weeks, we serve as a coach and as advisor. And we empower one of the residents to be a community empowerment officer, CEO. They are responsible for facilitating the process. And then at the end of the 6 weeks, they work to implement their strategy and their goal, and we serve as advisors. Our objective is to do this in such a way that the program is able to be repeated by the residents and helps them to find solutions to problems that are important to their community, and that it is able to scale to other neighborhoods and communities around our city. So, in conclusion, I no longer get up with a mission and a desire to save the world. I wake up with a smile on my face. And after spending 5 to 10 minutes imagining where and how I live in a more beautiful world, lately I've begun to walk around my co-working space and my office, imagining that I'm at the beach with lots of cool seashells. And I've even begun to look at hammocks around the trees and the idea of putting up a fire pit in the backyard, in the back here. So this process helps me to slow down and discover new things, to be playful and enjoy the moment. And it's from this place that I create, and from this place I smile at a coworker, I hug a family member, and I embrace the other. So my question for all of you in this room and all of us here is, how will you co-create this new story of a more beautiful world that we know is possible? How will you use the barometer of your heart to be able to tell if you're truly making a difference? And what other will you invite to hear their story, find their similarities, and honor our differences? In my mind, this is the genesis of innovation from the grassroots up. Thank you very much.